The rain had not stopped for 3 days when Elena first heard the boy's cries carried on the wind. She was kneeling in her small garden behind the cottage at the edge of Millbrook, pulling weeds from around the herbs she grew for the sick and the tired townsfolk who came to her door. She had lived in this quiet human village for almost 4 years now, known simply as Ellie, a healer with gentle hands and a calm voice. No one here knew she had once been a she-wolf of low rank, cast out in front of an entire kingdom by the very man they now called Alpha King. She had buried that name, that pain, deep inside her. She told herself she was free of it. But when the cries reached her, sharp and desperate, carried by a wind that smelled of blood and pine and something ancient, her hands stilled over the soil. She knew that scent. She knew the weight of panic riding on it. Somewhere close, someone was dying. She followed the sound through the trees at the edge of town, her heart pounding, old instincts waking after years of sleep. What she found in the clearing stopped her breath entirely. A group of wolves, some in human form, some not, surrounded a fallen boy no older than 12. His clothes were torn, his side open and bleeding freely, his breathing shallow and wet. The guards around him were shouting, pressing cloth to the wound, but their panic was doing more harm than good. One of them, an older man with silver at his temples, was weeping openly as he begged the boy to hold on. Elena did not think, she simply moved. "Let me through," she said, and something in her voice, steady and commanding despite the years of silence, made the guards step back without question. She knelt beside the boy and pressed her palms to the wound, feeling immediately how deep it ran, how close to the vital organs the injury sat. She recognized this kind of wound. She recognized, too, the healing gift that had once made her mother famous among wolves, before jealousy and politics buried her family's name in shame. It was a rare inheritance, passed down through blood, one that Elena had spent years pretending she no longer carried. She could not pretend now. She closed her eyes and let the old warmth rise in her palms, a golden thread of power that had not been used in so long it ached to be free. She poured it into the boy, feeling his heartbeat stutter, then steady, then grow stronger beneath her hands. The guards around her went silent, watching in stunned disbelief as the wound slowly began to close, the bleeding easing, the boy's ragged breathing smoothing into something deeper and calmer. It took nearly an hour. By the end of it, Elena's arms trembled with exhaustion, sweat mixing with the rain on her face. But the boy was alive, his eyes fluttered open, confused and weak, but alive. "Thank you," the silver-haired guard whispered, gripping her hand. "Thank you, whoever you are. The Alpha King will want to reward you himself. Please, come with us. Tell us your name." The words struck her like cold water. The Alpha King. She had not asked whose son this was. She had only seen a dying child and acted, but now, hearing those words, memory rushed back all at once. Torches lit at midnight, the entire pack gathered in the courtyard, herself standing small and trembling before a proud, cold-eyed man who looked at her as though she were nothing. Unworthy, he had called her, in front of everyone. A stain on his court. He had rejected her so completely, so publicly, that she had left that same night and never once looked back. And this boy, this child she had just saved with her own 2 hands, was his son. She could not stay. She would not stay. "I'm only a traveling healer," she said quickly, pulling her hood low over her face. "I have supplies to gather. Please, look after him. He'll need rest, and warmth, and quiet for a few days." Before anyone could stop her, she slipped back into the trees and disappeared into the rain. By the time King Damien Voss arrived at the clearing, his son was already sitting up, pale but breathing easily, wrapped in blankets and surrounded by relieved guards. Damien fell to his knees beside the boy, gathering him into his arms with a desperation that frightened even his own advisors, men who had never seen their king show such open emotion. "Kale," he said, voice breaking. "Kale, I thought I had lost you." "A woman saved me, father," Kale murmured against his shoulder. "She had golden light in her hands. She was kind. She told them to look after me, and then she left." Damien pulled back, studying his son's face. "A healer? Do we know her name?" The silver-haired guard, Commander Torin, shook his head, his expression troubled. She wouldn't give it, my king. She vanished before we could properly thank her. But her gift, I have not seen healing like that in 15 years, not since. He stopped himself, but Damien's eyes sharpened. Since who, Torin? The old commander hesitated, then spoke carefully. Since the Lysander bloodline. Her mother, my king, if I am not mistaken. The healer who once served your father's court before the family was disgraced. Damien went very still. He remembered that bloodline. He remembered, too, a young woman with tired eyes and trembling hands who had stood before him years ago, hoping for a place in his pack, only to be turned away because of the shame attached to her family's name. He remembered how coldly he had spoken to her, how he had called her unworthy in front of hundreds of witnesses, more concerned with his own reputation and the whispers of his court than with the frightened girl standing before him. He had not thought of her in years. He had told himself it did not matter, that pack politics required hard decisions, that he had done what a king must do. But now, staring at his son, alive because of a woman who had saved him and asked for nothing in return, guilt rose in Damien's chest like a tide he could not hold back. Find her, he said quietly. Torin blinked. My king? Find her, Damien repeated, standing, his voice hardening with command, even as something uncertain moved behind his eyes. I want to know who she is. I want to thank her properly. Send trackers through every human town within 100 miles. I don't care how long it takes. What Damien did not say, what he barely allowed himself to think, was that the description Torin had given him, the golden healing light, the Lysander name, the vanishing into rain and shadow, had planted a suspicion in his heart he was almost afraid to examine. Could it be her? The search that followed consumed the kingdom for weeks. Trackers moved through human villages disguised as merchants and travelers, quietly asking after healers with unusual gifts. Word spread among the wolf packs that the Alpha King himself was searching for the woman who had saved his son, and rumors grew with every retelling. Some said she was a lost princess. Some said she was a spirit sent to protect the royal bloodline. Few guessed the truth, that she was simply a woman trying to remain hidden from a past that had once broken her. Elena felt the search closing in before she understood its cause. Strangers in Millbrook began asking careful questions about the healer with golden hands. A merchant lingered too long near her cottage, watching. She recognized the signs of a hunt, gentle as it seemed, and knew instinctively who had ordered it. She should have felt flattered, perhaps, that the Alpha King wanted to find and thank her. Instead, she felt only anger rising through old grief, sharp and unhealed. She packed a single bag that night and left Millbrook before dawn. For weeks, she moved between towns, always one step ahead of the search, never staying long enough to be found. She told herself she was protecting her peace, her hard-won anonymity, her freedom from a world that had once discarded her. But some nights, lying awake in unfamiliar rooms, she wondered if she was really running from Damien, or from the memory of who she used to be before his rejection taught her to hide. It was Damien himself, in the end, who found her. He had grown restless with reports and rumors, unable to sit on his throne while his son's rescuer remained unknown and unthanked. Against the advice of his advisors, he left the kingdom personally, following the faintest trail of clues that Torin's trackers had gathered, a description of a healer's touch, a pattern of towns visited, a phrase repeated by grateful patients that he recognized from long ago. He found her at last in a small village near the coast, in a quiet clinic where she was tending to a child's fever. He stood in the doorway, unnoticed for a long moment, watching her work with the same careful, steady hands he remembered from years before, older now, more tired, but unmistakably her. Elena, he said softly. She froze. The name struck her like a blow, a name she had not heard spoken aloud in years. She turned slowly, and when she saw him standing there, tall and grave in the doorway, all the careful walls she had built around her heart began to crack. You shouldn't have come, she said, voice trembling with anger she had carried silently for years. I didn't save your son for gratitude. I didn't want to be found. I know, Damien said, but I needed to see you. I needed to thank you. And I needed. He hesitated, something raw crossing his features. I needed to apologize. An apology won't undo what you did, she said, stepping back from him, her hands curling into fists at her sides. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You called me unworthy. You made me believe I was nothing, that my family's name made me unfit to even stand in your presence. I left that night with nothing, and I built a life far from all of it, far from wolves, far from you. And now you show up because your son needed saving, and I happen to be the one who could do it. You're right, Damien said quietly, and the honesty in his voice startled her into silence. I was proud. I was afraid of what my court would think, afraid of the whispers about your family's disgrace touching my own name. I made a decision based on fear and pride, instead of seeing the person standing in front of me. I have carried that shame for years, Elena. I did not come here only because you saved Cale. I came because I have wanted, for a long time, to tell you that I was wrong. Elena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Wrong doesn't give me back what I lost. No, Damien agreed. It doesn't. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I only wanted you to know the truth, and to know that my son is alive because of your kindness. Kindness I never deserved from you. Before Elena could answer, small footsteps sounded behind Damien, and Cale appeared in the doorway, having insisted on accompanying his father despite his advisor's concerns. He looked at Elena with wide, grateful eyes. You're the healer, he said, the one with the golden hands. I never got to thank you properly. Elena's carefully guarded heart softened at the sight of the boy, healthy and whole, standing before her. You don't need to thank me, she said gently. I'm just glad you're well. My father searched for weeks, Cale said. He wouldn't rest until he found you. I think he wanted to make things right. Elena looked at Damien then, really looked at him, past the crown and the years and the old wounds, and saw a man who had carried his mistake as heavily as she had carried her pain. She did not forgive him fully, not in that moment, not with words that could erase years of hurt in a single conversation. But something in her chest loosened, just slightly, enough to let her breathe without the old weight pressing down so hard. I need time, she said finally. I need time to think about what any of this means. But I don't hate you, Damien. I never did. I only wanted to matter to someone who was supposed to protect me. You matter, Damien said, his voice thick with emotion. You always did. I was simply too foolish and too afraid to see it. Weeks later, Damien stood before his entire court, Elena at his side, and spoke words he should have spoken years before, acknowledging her courage, her skill, and the injustice she had suffered under his rule. He restored her family's name and offered her a place of honor within the kingdom, not as a reward for saving his son, but as recognition of who she had always been. Elena did not accept out of obligation, and she made that clear to everyone listening. She accepted because, for the first time since that terrible night years ago, she felt she was being seen not as a mistake to be corrected, but as a woman whose worth had never depended on anyone's approval but her own. As she stood in the courtyard where she had once been publicly rejected, now standing tall and unafraid, Elena understood that healing, the kind that mattered most, was not something she had given only to a wounded boy in the rain. It was something she had finally, slowly, begun giving to herself.